Caroline Pavlovic. Here. Looking much better, I might add.
Yeah.
I'm glad you're well. Ryan McCray,
Here.
Chairperson Raby,
Here.
Vice Chairperson Rob Johnson,
Here.
Peter Henderson,
Here.
Emmanuel Garcia,
Here.
Sonia Del Rio,
Here.
Chairperson Raby. You do have a quorum and you have one student member in attendance.
Lovely.
I
Okay.
will also add for the record that Tracy Powell had confirmed his attendance, but he has had an emergency and has just let us know that he will not be attending due to something work related.
I hope everything is okay with Tracy. Thank you for that update. So for our agenda, we have public comments. Do we have any comments today?
We do not have any public comments today.
Okay. Review of the minutes from our last meeting held on March 14th, 2025. We have a motion to approve.
A motion.
Second.
Second.
It's been moved by Peter Henderson, seconded by Rob Johnson, that the minutes from March 14th, 2025 be approved as submitted. We'll take a roll call vote. Scott Vanderwill,
Yes.
Caroline Pavlovic,
Yes.
Ryan McCray,
Yes.
Chairperson Raby.
Yes.
Vice Chairperson Johnson,
Yes.
Peter Henderson.
Yes.
Sonia Del Rio.
Yes.
The minutes are approved.
Okay.
The motion passes, I'm sorry.
Thank you. I would like to make a request to move the chairman's report to after the working session, to make an adjustment to the agenda. Motion,
A motion.
second.
I'll second.
It's been moved by Peter Henderson, seconded by Scott Vanderwill, that the agenda be amended to move the chairman's report to item number 5 after the CAB working session. We'll take a roll call vote. Sonia Del Rio,
Yes.
Peter Henderson,
Yes.
Rob Johnson,
Yes.
Chairperson Raby,
Yes.
Ryan McCray,
Yes.
Caroline Pavlovic,
Yes.
Scott Vanderwill.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, so agenda item 5, the CAB working session includes a red and purple modernization program update.
Good morning. Good to see everybody again. For the record, I am Bill Mooney and I'm the Chief Infrastructure Officer for the Chicago Transit Authority. I am providing an update on the Red Purple Modernization Phase 1 project. I will start with kind of a general slide and then most of it's recent project update stuff. So not knowing exactly how familiar folks are with the project has been going on for a while. It's been out there in the world. So I did want to talk a little bit about the scope, and then if there's more details, please, you can feel free to stop me at any point and we can get into kind of more depth. So the project really is 3 sub-projects at the end of the day. We talk about it as, because we love acronyms, not only the RPM, but also the Red Purple Bypass, or RPB, which is the flyover down at Clark Junction. So that was the track we created to be able to grade separate the Brown line at what is called Clark Junction, which was one of the historically largest flat junctions in the world. And what would happen there was every time the Brown line went to go back to Kimball, it would tie up all 4 of the red and purple tracks and nothing could move. And so that created a delay in service, and ultimately part of the way we were able to access core capacity funds for this project was by opening up the capacity in that junction there. So flyover was kind of phase 1 or milestone 1, kind of the RPB area. That went into service in, it was 2019, December 2019, I think. And then after that went into service, we started rebuilding everything underneath it. So over the last 5 years or so, we have completely rebuilt and modernized that interlocking. I'll show you some pictures of that. It's a pretty significant point in the project itself. Probably some cases the most complicated piece of the project. And up north from there is what we call LBMM, or the Lawrence to Bryn Mawr modernization. So this is a full modernization of the area from about Ardmore all the way down to Lawrence Avenue. We completely removed the embankment. We have installed new segmental box structures for the tracks. And we have 4 brand new ADA accessible stations that will be coming online later this summer. And then the last piece of this project is the quarter signal improvement, or what we'll often call the CSI portion. So this is a a component, but it's a component that's in all the other components. So this is actually upgrading the signal system from just south of what is Clark Junction, an interlocking called Berry, all the way up to Howard Terminal. It goes right up to the edge of the terminal. In a last point is called Jarvis Relay House there that goes up right to the edge of the interlocking there. So signal systems are exceptionally important because they are a main safety feature of our railroad. So they give permissive speeds to the operator and tell them it's okay to go and what speed it's okay to go at. And so similar to, they also provide the traffic lights. So like as you come to an intersection with a car and you get a red arrow, you get a green arrow, you get a red stop. We have those that are interlockings where we can switch tracks, and that's controlled by the signal system. They are exceptionally complicated to install. They are even more complicated to design. It is a specialized field in the electrical mechanical world. And so this is really gives us 23 miles worth of modern signal system that is forward compatible. So you hear a lot of people talk about positive train control, as this will allow us, as we upgrade cars potentially in the long term, to switch to a digital system that gives us a lot of those positive train controls where we can precision stop trains on a dime versus in these bigger blocks we currently work in today. So we're almost there. After what has felt like a lifetime for many of us, we are seeing the finish line is readily ahead of us. We are currently finishing up those 4 stations I talked about opening up. We are seeing the 2 southbound tracks, which is what we call tracks 1 and 2. We are currently running on the 2 northbound tracks, which we call 3 and 4. And so we put those in service 2 years ago. So we are in the process of finishing up that track structure. We look to cut that over with the new stations. We've just completed a bunch of work in the Clark Junction area, as I mentioned, and we're really close to the end of the signal project as well. So here's some update photos. So this is Lawrence. So this is the furthest south of the LBMM station. So here you can see the elevator being put together and installed. All these stations, similar to how we've done the track structure on this project, started north up in the Thorndale area, working south. So the farthest along stations, as you see these photos, will be the Bryn Mawr stations. The least developed stations are Lawrence, because the crews have kind of worked north to south for everything. So as they built the track and they started building that station, as they built this track, they started building that station. All the stations come online at the same point in time. So they actually are making faster ground in Argyle and Lawrence than they were at Bryn Mawr and Berwyn. Part of that's learning curve. So as they built this once over, they get faster each time they do it. You can see the name sign here. You can see the translucent canopy. You can see the finishes around the lighting there. Gives you a sense of that station. Here is Argyle. So Argyle is now working north, the second least finished. You can see the interior finishes here. You can see the glass enclosure around the elevator there. You can see the stainless steel. You can see kind of the bottom picture on the left there is the auxiliary exit on the opposite side of the street. And then you can see some of the artistic architectural features that go with Argyle. All these stations have custom first in its kind world-class art that will be part of the station openings. They also have a second world-class art piece that came with many of the stations when we did rehabs of them back in 2012. So the historical art will actually go back in the auxiliaries. That's the opening you see kind of there in that finished picture. And Argyle, this was the design process around these stations had a lot of community input. The Asian community around Argyle, which is a really central point of the Edgewater area up there, wanted a very fixture piece in the architecture there. They wanted some things that really separated it and helped define it. So there's some very discrete architectural features here, one of which is this Argyle station sign on the exterior. Anyone that remembers the historical station, there used to be a giant Asia and Argyle sign that overlapped the street that came down to make way for the wider structure. This is a modernization symbol kind of to that. It also has this really creative, interesting lighting. You can see it kind of on the underpass there. We commonly call it the Tetris lighting. But it's color codes, it's got some movement to it, and then that same imagery mirrors into the pavers on the street below ultimately. So you can see similar in the Argyle sign that carries over to under and that carries down to the pavers. It also has kind of a more distinctive red finish on the exterior, which is different than all the other stations. All 4 of the stations are very distinctively different. And they're representative of these micro communities in this quarter. So even though it's only like a 1.5 mile quarter, there are very distinctive micro communities that have very strong different opinions about those aspects in their neighborhoods, which has been interesting to see develop in a community process. Here is Berwyn. So one of the key kind of features in Berwyn is this larger picture on the left. It's called the Oculus. It is a extended canopy that goes out towards the public way, and it consumes one of the structural elements that holds the tracks up. That's that big pillar in the middle. And so they took advantage of the fact that they wanted this big cantilever canopy there. It's a really distinctive architectural edge. It creates kind of this defined, clean line there, but a little edginess to it. And they made it, the interior design then of the station roof kind of blends off of it. And so the lighting you'll see kind of comes off almost like a ray of light. And so they were treating it almost like a big sun. We were getting this natural light coming through where this pillar is, and it shoots out there as sunlight. It's a cool little feature. That lighting pattern carries over into the back of the station. You can actually see it a little bit in the picture on the top right there, and how those angles of the lights carry from that oculus point. Reality is it just, they had to fit the pillar through the roof, but this is again, like how an architect can work a piece of enhancement into it so you don't notice that large structural element. And then you can see some of those similar platform finishes down there at Berwyn. And then, as I mentioned before, Bryn Mawr is by far the farthest along of all of them. So here you see the almost finished stations. I was out there yesterday, and where that gap is in the shiny, clean terrazzo floor is actually fair equipment. You know, you were a bit of a transit geek when you walk into a station, you see a turnstile going in, you're like, oh my God, it's a turnstile. But it is that sense of finish there, right? You know, that is that planted flag moment. So it's a turnstile, right? Yep. And I went back to it. I don't know if any of you have had the privilege of meeting Graham Garfield. Graham Garfield works for Chicago Transit Authority, but he is one of the foremost knowledgeable people on the CTA and its history in the world, and by definition, the purest of transit geeks. And so he and I share an office up at RPM, and I came back and I was like, hey, I was just on a Bryn Mawr. He's like, did you see the turnstile? I was like, my guy there, you know? But yeah. So Bryn Mawr is by far one of the farthest along. It has a very distinctive exterior. So if you remember old Bryn Mawr Station, it had these kind of discrete ornamental terracotta columns on the outside of the station. There was like 3 of them that the doors surrounded around. It was part of the design, the original design there. And we carry a representation of that historical element forward. It was really important, again, in this micro community conversation, that history of that. It's a very old portion of the city. You've got this connection to the Edgewater Hotel down the block, right? And so they wanted to keep some of that historical sense of that tie-in. So there is a little bit, it has a little different facade than the other ones, right? They carry a lot of similar color tones, so they carry through, but you get these little elements that make them a little bit different. And Bryn Mawr has these remnant representations of this terracotta. And it's subtle, and once you kind of know what you're looking for, you see it every time you see it. And Bryn Mawr is also unique in that it actually has 2 elevators. So all the stations typically have 1 entrance and 1 auxiliary exit that meets fire code requirements. That one is on the north side of the street, the other is on the south side of the street, depending which station it is. Depends kind of which one it is. But Bryn Mawr actually has an accessible entrance on the north side of Bryn Mawr and an accessible entrance on Hollywood, further down the block. So the platform actually goes north up towards Hollywood, which allowed us to actually create an entrance on Hollywood to serve a further northern point in the community there. And then there's an auxiliary exit on the south side of Bryn Mawr. So it is a big moment to see these coming out, to really see them come to finishes, see real stations, and we're really excited to see this and celebrate this later this summer. And then I talked a little bit about this earlier. This is Clark Junction. Again, it is CTA has had 3 of the largest flat junctions in the world. So Tower 12 and Tower 18, which are the 2 corners of downtown Chicago and the Loop, and then Clark Junction. So at the time we started this project, there was over 1,000 train movements a day going through Clark Junction, and about a quarter of those were the Brown Line moves going off that tied up that interlocking. And so here you can see the crews pouring in the last bit of track work. So this little 200 feet of track was the last piece that they did. We finished this up on May 4th, Sunday, May 4th. And we went out Monday morning as a team to kind of go out and celebrate that moment together. We had a little potluck and took a moment to recognize probably what was one of the most complicated milestones in this project. And as I was talking to our board earlier this week about this, my team was certainly insurmountably challenged by this and rose to that challenge and met it. And I give them credit and beyond credit. I give our contractor a ton of credit. If you don't build on an active railroad for a living, you don't appreciate how complicated the staging and phasing was to keep running trains around this 100 feet of track and then cut it over here and we're going to build this. And the staging for this ended on stage O for this like restoration of the ground bottom portion. That's how many little phases we had. And there was like dot phases in there. It was J.1, .2, and like it was crazy. And they were like 5 days like this. And then we'd phase change over. And as challenging as that was for all of us to keep track of and keep managing around and mobilizing things 24 hours a day and staffing it. It was just as challenging for our operations team for the last 5 years to be phasing around this, providing the flaggers and all those folks that support us throughout that time. And so enough credit can never be given to them to be able to drive through this that way and be able to manage kind of the railroad and meet our service demand around that. So I always like to give them that shout out as well. And then one of the more exciting things really is the project beyond the project. So as we finish up the real RPM this year, our board took action a few years ago to remove the historical embankment. So as we got into the final designs around the restoration of that element, it was no longer going to be used for a structural purpose, but was going to be kept in place and restored as an exterior wall. It became very clear that it was exceptionally degraded and had well gone beyond its useful life and really wasn't savable. It was something that even any work we did on it was going to result in us coming back every 5 to 10 years doing patching, doing other things. And we did not want to walk away with that in this type of investment. And so the board made kind of a really historic decision to not only remove the embankment, but to make that 1.2 miles of space available for public use. And so we started an entirely community-driven process that we call the Underhill Activation Program here. And so we finished up that community process. I think I actually have a slide on that. So here's what I just talked about, right? So we had this ugly old embankment there that was just going to keep that space enclosed. And it's really something that's kept that community divided fundamentally for years. It kept it dark, it kept it enclosed, but now you can see the difference just having the wall gone, how bright and how airy and how open that is. It was astonishing the first time I went by there and we took down the old viaduct on the last piece of viaduct and just had the wall gone. You had that all open and it was like, oh my God, how much light is here? How much space is here now is amazing. So we have 10 blocks of new previously unavailable space that we had to go out to community and program. So we started in January 24 and we did something that we don't often have the privilege of doing is going, we don't know what to do. What do you want? They went, what do you mean? Tell us what you want. Like, we have no great idea. We want to make this space available. We want to understand kind of like block by block, what you like, what you don't like. What do you want parking? Do you not want parking? Do you want water features? Do you want play spaces? Like, what's anything idea we got out here? Let's get it on the table. We had rooms surrounded in boards. There was over 500 people at these community meetings and we gave them stickers and they went around and voted on dog parks and continuous pathways and parking and, and gym equipment and so we then came back in May of 24 and said, okay, you guys went out and we collected all this information from you of everything you liked. And here were the themes we heard. We asked about color palettes. You like the orange sand brown color palettes versus the bright greens and blue color palettes, right? And said, so overwhelmingly, it was, we want a continuous path. That was number one, without a doubt, like what we want. We want a continuous path. And then beyond that, it was like, we want all these other little things in microbursts. And so we came out with this big program of concepts and development block by block, and it was really densely populated and stuff. And then they went, oh my God, that's way too much stuff. Like you have you've taken way too much information from us now and we need to hold that down. So we had this meeting in May and it was second round of public meetings and we had another 300 or 400 people out there opining on kind of these concept designs and programs and what really was the most desirable features. And then we came out in February of this year with the final rendition. So this was the final kind of plan that we took forward and authorized our design builder to execute in, I think it was April board. It was March board. They took action upon it after these community meetings. And here's a little bit of kind of here we go. Here's what we heard again. You can see some examples of these boards and all the dots and things that people liked or didn't like and how they weighed into them. And here are a couple of the images. So one of the things we walked away with is we want a space that can be used and activated constantly, right? That if you build too much fixed entity fixtures there, we can't evolve with it, right? The space can't evolve. We can't do festivals. We want open space. That we're a very dense, heavily built neighborhood, right? This is the prime world of ETOD. We want high rises, we want all those things, but that means we got limitations on where we can do this other open space. And so having the ability to have a food truck parade one weekend, with the SSAs, it's a big deal, right? But we also want destination spaces, right? Because now we've got this tie-in feature, this continuous path. we don't need a dog park every block. As long as there's a dog park somewhere in this path that the path gets you to, then you've kind of met the spirit of what we want out of that. So there's a bunch of little tie-in points. There's a dog park scattered here. There's a kids park scattered there. There's a couple open activatable spaces for markets. There's the ability to have an exercise area here. There's ability to have, support Lunar New Year activities, which is really popular. It comes straight through Argyle there. So you can have festival activities here. And then as you get further down into these denser business market areas, there is some availability for short-term parking, right? Because there is no real on-street parking. And then you get in all these other challenges. So you can turn over some meter parking there to support small businesses. And so like it was really interesting to see this whole process evolve, to see the community input change to it. It's really exciting. So we have started the design for the fullness of design beyond the concept at this point. We expect to break ground on this portion of the project in 26. And it should be completed entirely by the end of 26. So it is a pretty big, significant milestone. Again, kind of on the backside of this that we're excited to see unfold. So, and that's what I got for you. So if that gives you a sense of what Berwyn looked like way back in the heyday and how dark and low that viaduct was. We were blessed that they built this railroad for freight railroad traffic that was significantly heavier than us. So it was able to take a beating for a very, very, very long time. So.
Wow. Thank you. This was such a great presentation and just a really uplifting story around all of every element of that was really exciting to hear. I was geeking out with you, excited to hear the turnstiles being installed. But this is really fantastic. And I look forward to going up there and seeing it myself when it's open. But yeah, I don't have any questions. I'm just sharing my excitement about it and I look forward to checking it out.
Great.
We'll take questions and comments from other members of CAB.
Thorndale to Howard. Is there any guess when that might?
So I was actually in a meeting last night about RPM future phases. And so our planning department has been there was a series of community meetings, I think they were last year, where we were out kind of up and down the areas on either side of phase one. And they were starting to take the feedback about what they like about it, what we've done, what we don't like, what we want to see as prioritizations. And they've been putting together their cost estimates and sharpening their pencils kind of with modern dollars and design concepts. And I understand from the meeting last night is end of this year, they'll be coming out kind of with thoughts around timelines and next packaging of phasing. And it's really about what is the next group we try and get in the federal process. And so that is an exceptionally long process. I think when we talked to Arlie a few months back, we talked a little bit about how long we were in that process. It takes a long time. There are a lot of time-driven points in it. So when you enter formally into plan development, you have 2 years to get into engineering, and then in engineering, you've got 3 years to show progress to move to bid. But it takes a long time to get your environmental in place to even get into plan development. And so we got to decide kind of what that first set of packages are and what the world can financially support too, right? Stuff is no longer, not that it was ever cheap, but it certainly is no longer as cheap as it once was to do. And so when everything is in the billions term, you have to package enough to be able to support it locally and be able to get a footprint in that program. So I think my answer to you is Molly Poppy or somebody will come back later this summer and tell you about it. So I don't want to steal their show.
I do have another question that kind of popped up, if that's okay. It was about kind of the activation spaces, which is really awesome that the removal of the embankment provided additional space for that. So how, what does that, who is owning that space? Is that CA managing and providing whatever the structure is for that, or is this some kind of a partnership with another entity that is kind of leading, renting or that process of getting vendors into that space?
All of the above.
Okay.
So we ultimately own the property and we are responsible for the upkeep and maintenance of the property. And part of the goal in this process is to work with our community partners to be able to carve out areas and to talk about programming, right? I'll be honest, I don't want to program a park full time. I've got other interests.
Sounded very.
Nor am I very good at it. What I claim to be very good at it. we later this year will go out with another round of kind of community engagement, starting this, okay, you wanted space to program. Who are the people we should be talking to about programming? What types of things do we want to see for programming? Who are our partners there? We've had relationships with community organizations. Uptown United's one of those where we've done kind of some activational space around there. So we see there's probably some joint opportunities to bring some folks in to that. We're probably going to bring on a property manager to help deal with some of the parking management and some of the other things that go around there too. But we intend to kind of start on the, now that we're moving forward, we'll have some more definition on design. Like, what is it? You all said programming, like, what does programming mean, right? Like, and who should we be talking to in the neighborhood about that? And we've been in this footprint for a very long time. We have a lot of direct contacts with organizations. We have a lot of organizations that already reached out and are like, hey, we want in on this, right? But we want the community to be able to engage in that too and say like, yeah, we don't like those. Like, they may want it, right? You'd be surprised, right? Like,
I'm not surprised.
you got to work that want it and want access and want to do things, but they don't feel like that's fully represented in the interest of the community, right? So to be able to have a bit of that conversation. So it will ultimately be a bit of both, right? I think there'll be areas that we just solely manage outright. Then there'll be other aspects of it that we'll probably work with an SSA or a community organization under some type of license agreement to allow them to use and activate that space and bring in events and things like that.
Thank you.
I was wondering about, I know there's been a few like random ideas I've seen shot out, mostly by members of the public to have like an infill purple station at Loyola. Is that something that the CTA has considered in the future of RPM?
Yes. They talk about that later this year, and I think they talk about those packaging. So you'll hear kind of thoughts around what is the right mix of stations and service to those stations. And
Yeah.
actually fits in those. You balance these things, right? Because you want more platforms. That means you got to have more real estate. And now when you get into some of these areas, real estate is really challenging. Fixing the curve at Sheridan to make that not a thing that goes like this. There is like a 400 unit, multi-story condo building there that in and of itself would be like $1 billion in acquisition and demolition just to deal with, right? And so that becomes really challenging, right? You look at those pros and cons when you look at those things.
Yeah, no, another thing I've seen thrown out there is the idea of like making the red and purple both run 7 days a week and having the red line be the local, like Linden through 95th or eventually 130th, and then having the purple be like sort of a north side to Loop Express, something like that. I don't know if there's any like other changes other than the Loyola infill that you've thought about.
So, I mean, I think my world thinks really about how that infrastructure interfaces and what our operations and planning folks see in the modeling of demand, right? And so I think the question about whether you run purple as an express 7 days a week or through the base of the day or things like that really is a planning study of, is there demand for it that could support the cost of running that service all day long? And that cost is not just a person operating that train. There's mileage on that train. So every time that wheel rolls around, it counts a mile. And every so many miles, somebody's got to get that train in the shop for rehab, right? It's got to go in for inspection. It's got to do these things. And so like the more you run the miles on the vehicles, the more it drives that maintenance cycle, which ultimately becomes more expensive in some cases than the operator. So they look at that. And so what I think we look at is, how do we not preclude things like that, right? How do we make ourselves forward compatible? How do we leave our options available? How do we keep as much flexibility around there as possible so that they can look at the ever-changing model of ridership? We're in a very dynamic world right now, and ridership that was the way 10 years ago is no longer the way people think about travel.
One last thing from me. So with the space under the L, I noticed that like the tracks overhead, it seems like it's just like solid. Like there's not the risk of, I know sometimes with, there's sometimes the risk of getting a little bit of L juice.
Oh,
I like to call it.
yeah, no, that is one of those things that is exceptionally unique about this opportunity. Lots of people sit there and go, why didn't you do everywhere? Well, I mean, to be honest, have you ever been underneath the structure on the Green Line? It's loud. I mean,
It's loud.
it's a very pleasant place to live in, right? And that's because it is, 100-year-old metal structure with wood ties on it. So this is modern segment.
Yeah.
construction. So it is an enclosed concrete structure, concrete track ties. And so there is no juice to drip. And so not only does that, there's nothing that risk of falling
Yeah.
because of its enclosed nature, but it also is really quiet.
So-
It is so incredibly quiet that I was doing a tour with Alderwoman Manna Hoppenworth the other day at one of the stations. She was taking a little sneak peek of one of them, and we were in the station having a whole conversation about something, and we had 3 trains come over us, and like nobody realized they were there. That's that quiet. At this point. Oh, it is crazy quiet. Like,
Never heard of
Yeah.
quiet CTA.
and the trains themselves are still out. Well, I mean,
I mean, just,
train people will tell you my tracks are loud. I'll say the trains are loud, right? But so you enclose it, right? So that nothing goes down, and then there's sound walls, and that echoes whatever sound there is up. And so that's part of it when we talk about our planning environmental considerations is that federal process. We have to look at that, right? How do we reduce the sound pollution that transit creates, right? How do you manage those impacts? And we do things like we weld rails, so there's no longer joints, or we minimize the number of joints. So you don't get that clack clack as a train wheel travels by. But also sound walls and how you use concrete to consume that sound and control its flow is a big deal.
So these don't have wood rail, ties.
Yeah,
Okay.
if you look, like you see them here, right, that's all concrete. So it's all
That's great.
base, concrete
Oh.
bottom, concrete walls.
I think oh, there you go.
There we go. So,
That's impressive. Does that make it, like the structure like more sturdy and last longer I would imagine that you don't have to.
What was required in design of this contract was a 100-year structure. And so not only did the design builder have to design something for 100 years, they had to bring on a separate engineering firm to write a report that actually certifies that the design meets the 100-year service life. Without, routine maintenance, right, clearly, but like that the design concept can be last for 100 years, and concrete can get you there. So it's got sealers on it. It's got a bunch of other protection coating. It's the base plan for what we went out with in ROE as well. Is again, 100-year service life on a piece of asset here. So.
I want to piggyback off of what Caroline said. I've been hearing a lot, about different services with Purple Line Express running on the weekends. I don't know if you remember this, but the Red Line has an Ashland the 63rd program
Hodar.
from the 5,000 when we had the Red Line South reconstruction. And I always thought about, having, Red Line service run through rush hour or weekday express to there too, because I know that they cut off the Ashland part.
So I remember in 1994, I was at Clark and Lake Station when we opened the Howard Dan Ryan connector, so which allowed us to realign the service from what used to be Harlem used to go to 95th, right? And then you had Howard that went
Howard to right. That was the old track.
Yeah, we had our mascots. Big white puffy guys. One wore a green hat and one wore a red vest and a red hat. And one was named Hodar for Howard Dan Ryan. And then the other one was named Ellie Jack for Lake Englewood Jackson Park.
Yeah.
Not to be confused with Hodar from Game of Thrones. Okay.
Well ahead of that. But yeah, so I remember that. And I also remember when we had, because, I don't think people that haven't experienced transit in other cities appreciate how incredibly transit rich a lot of our neighborhoods are.
Yes.
And I live on the eastern edge of Albany Park, and I can walk to the Brown Line. I can walk to the longer walk to the Blue Line. I've got 5 different bus routes that I can walk to within 5 minutes to get me somewhere in the city. My wife's favorite thing to do is do bus dates. It's like we pick restaurants that we can get to by bus. And we were very, very lucky when we looked at the Dan Ryan, that we had redundancy of service with the Green Line so close for so much, which allowed us to do service plan there, able to help shuttle folks to that service. Similarly, when we did work on the Blue Line a couple summers ago, right? We have the Green Line North, we have the Pink Line South, right? And we were able to shuttle locally, but we were able to push people to other alternative travel to help them find the alternative routes. And so, I mean, having, again, like I don't plan the service, but having the ability in our infrastructure to have flexibility around those things, to be able to think through those, to have, be able to have a service system that can evolve with the city is really important. So.
Right. I want to also add, it was a great presentation. Like I said before we started, this is one of the things I'm really excited about. And I remember before the Belmont flyover where we had to wait and because all those trains going to the loop had priority. So when that brown line come, it was like, oh yeah, we're standing momentarily waiting for signal clearance. So yeah, like I said, it's a long time coming, but I'm very excited for those stations to open this summer. And like I said, I'm proud of the work that your team has been doing, and I'm glad that you're geeked out like I am about this. You gotta have somebody that's very enthusiastic with the job, and you fit all of that. So like I said, again, I'm proud of you and proud of your team for just pushing everybody to continue this, because this is gonna be another monumental turning point in authority. So again, thank you.
It is. And so you guys will get some of the last sneak peeks stations. We're starting to pull back we've had a very voluminous social profile here. And so we're starting to pull back because we don't want to reveal too early. So.
Right.
Just maybe a refresher for myself. I'm a little fuzzy. Is this one of like the transit TIF funded projects?
It's a transit ticket. The original transit.
Okay, that's it.
It is also the original or capacity project in the CIG program. So when we took Senator Durbin, who's now retiring, to look at this, and we talked about the challenges we had around funding massive infrastructure rehabs for state of good repair like this, and how when the CIG program at the federal level is about line extensions. It's about new starts. It's about getting growing rail service. But we wanted to get access to those big federal dollars to major state of good repair project. And he worked very strongly to upgrade the federal language around projects that could get in there. So you could show a capacity increase within the build you're doing that is really fundamentally a state of good repair build by untangling old infrastructure, right? So Clark Junction doing this created capacity for us to grow as a line. So that was a really key point in it. And the local match for it was one of the 5 projects that are authorized under the transit TIF.
Is the transit TIF, is it structured as far as terms go, like a traditional TIF, like 20-something years, or is it kind of purpose
Yes.
created?
So it is restricted in its footprint, right? So it is half mile on either side of the footprint of the rail project. It has this holds true for ROE, any of the others are project, right? So it has this parameter, you have to be along the railroad. And it is defined by distance for each of these projects from a north, south, east, west relationship. And it overlays over existing TIFs that may be there. So there's a Bryn Mawr TIF, there's other things that we can take the overlay on top of. But the other taxing bodies that gain revenue out of TIF districts or out of the property taxes get their share regardless of our TIF. So CPS, who gets a levy out of the property taxes to fund the public school system, they get their increment before we hold anything for the TIF. So it's a little different than the traditional TIFs in that sense. It does have a sunset to it, like other TIFs. Those can be extended. So the RPM TIF was not for RPM phase 1, right? So it could sunset. It could be extended to accommodate a phase 2, a phase 3, a phase 7, whatever it is. It is not exclusive to Chicago either, right? So Chicago passed its own ordinance to allow us to TIF within Chicago, but you can go into Evanston and take a transit TIF into Evanston. It is state legislation that establishes it. So any governing body can establish a TIF for us as such. So
Thanks. Thank you for the presentation.
Any other questions, comments, recommendations to the board as it relates to RPM that you may need some insight from Bill Mooney on?
I was
Sure,
just curious. Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, I didn't.
I didn't know you were.
I had a call and but when soon the meeting started, I had a call, so I'm sorry I couldn't say present. I am here and present. I had a question. Well, first, just thank you so much for the presentation. I can feel your energy and your passion, and it was very interesting to learn more about the stop. I did have a question about the diversity spending goals. I don't know if you can talk about those numbers or strategies to get those vendors, that minority vendor outreach to secure those contracts.
Yeah, I'm glad to touch on it a little bit. Yeah, usually when I do this, I have my partner in crime, Juan Pablo, who does those slides every month, but it is a relationship partner. So we did a bunch of things with RPM when we procured this contract that were different historically than what we did on a lot of things. We have a construction goal of DBE participation. It is 22%. I got a couple kicking around in my head between projects. I think it's 22% overall as a goal. Then there is also an apprentice workforce goal. There is an EDA requirement workforce goal. And then there's a WIOA workforce goal. The Walsh Floor, who is the design builder on the project, is on target to meet or exceed all the goals in relationship to the project at this point. It looks like workforce, they'll meet those numbers, and DBE, they will probably exceed a little bit. When you talk about procuring a typical construction project and say even the big ones at $100 million, you talk about a 20% commitment on goal there, you're talking about $200 million, right? Which, as an industry of supportive entities, there is not a challenge, right? When we had to go do this, you had to go to capacity of market and say, is there enough market to have a goal that's talking about things in the range of $200, $300, $400 million worth of contracting opportunities? And then you get into weird things like specialized construction, like segmental box. There are only one or two people in the world building segmental box, let alone any DBEs doing, because it's just not a thing that's done out there. And so like all of a sudden that was a huge component of the cost. So how do you work that in? So part of what went with the bid and was something we replicated in RLE was they had to provide a diversity outreach plan, right? So they had to talk about how they were going to meet their goal, the types of things they were going to do. One of the big deals that happened here is lots of micro packaging. So they may have a concrete package that in and of itself is worth $40 million in design, and they will actually bid it as 5 or 6 smaller discrete packages, which from a contracting management standpoint is the general, it's challenging because you've got 6 or 7 subs that you got to manage through and you got to have overlap to, but it's the way to make the packages competitive for small business opportunities. We actually went and hired workforce partners to support this project, and we replicated that now. We have a general blanket. We use them for all our projects. We have 6 of them, I think. We're about to recompete it again. We'll take more if more people can qualify. But if you're going to have break the glass ceiling workforce goals, then you need to help the community be ready to take those opportunities. And so RPM had these massive hiring numbers, and I'm sorry, I don't, it's something to the tune of like 1.7 million hours worth of work on this thing. I mean, it's, if you look at the construction report that's posted online, Juan Pablo has slides at the end that give you the status of all the workforce and DBE hiring on this job specifically, and all those goals and where they're at. And they're astounding numbers when you think about it. But when you talk about a project that's 5 years and multi-billion dollars, like it's something like, oh, that makes a lot of sense, right? But that's a lot of folks you got to hire up. And that's a lot of folks that you can't just hire without any skill. And so that's a lot of folks you got to get ready to be able to go into unions, to be able to take on those opportunities. And getting into unions is challenging at times. And there are minimum standards for physical performance. There are minimum standards for math and things like that, because, you know, you got to be able to read a ruler. Because if you don't, a lot of bad things happen, right? And so like it really made us rethink how we do DB and workforce, because it was a monumental opportunity that we believed was going to be the cascade of a lot of great things to come. Not only were you had a project that had such incredible length that you could get on a job and potentially be on that job as an apprentice to a journeyman, which is almost unparalleled in and of itself, to get enough hours to be able to make journeyman within the union on a single job, and stability long enough that another job could come around potentially, like, right? We saw this as we do this, and the airport does their Terminal 5 expansion, all those other things, those multi-billion. Well, these folks now can all of a sudden roll into that work, right? We've created industry. Then you roll that into RLE now, and we can keep growing and building into a trade workforce. So we saw this as really a groundbreaking chance to set a stage for a future of Chicago. And Juan Pablo and his team, I mean, have been astonishing. It really has been and I would certainly invite you guys to talk to them in general about the program if you're not familiar with it. It is really an amazing program. And
Can you repeat the name of the program?
so our diversity outreach programs, right? So our DBE, our small business enterprise contracting, our workforce, programs. So, Juan Pablo Prieto is our director of the program. He is a really talented, hardworking team. They're very committed to the project and the beliefs beyond the project, right? And what is fundamental to who we are as an agency in some cases. And this costs more. I'm not gonna lie to you. Running a very aggressive DB and workforce program is more expensive. It just is. But again, that's fundamental to who we are as an agency, that we believe the dollars we're spending have a transformational impact beyond concrete and steel. And we want to see that cascade down, and we'll have a long-term investment, right? Because I think I've said it before, every dollar invested in transit is $5 return economically in the city of Chicago. So.
One other thing on that, so like with the diversity outreach programs, is there, with the federal government's attacks on DEI, is there any federal funding that could potentially be at risk due to having those DEI programs in place? And if so, is there a plan to work around any federal constraints while maintaining the, all of the DEI, the diversity programs?
So I will say very happily that Secretary Duffy was in Senate hearings yesterday and was actually given a question about, do you intend to cancel any of the CIG projects that were awarded FFGAs of the prior administration? And named off 6 projects, including the Red Line Extension project. And he just went on the record and said, I have no intention of canceling any of those projects. And I know that has been a question that we get repeatedly in the newspaper, and we stand that we have an executed full funding grant agreement, which is our contract with the federal government to fund that project and see it forward. But it also felt good to hear them say, yes, we acknowledge we have an agreement as well, right? So that was good. But to your broader question, so I have counsel in the room who can certainly opine broader on this. We feel pretty strongly that our DBE program is our DBE program, right? And so our requirements and commitments to DBE and workforce are an establishment not only under requirements for use of federal dollars, because it is still a federal program. We use DBE because we are such a federally driven agency versus MBE or VBE or WBE or any of those other things. We are governed by a DBE program. That's why we have it. But it is our program, our goals and our policies that meet a federal standard, but they are still our goals and policies and all those things. Separately, our workforce goals are our workforce goals, and we also are a state registered agency. And as such, we are compliant with state law on those things. And those things, regardless of if the federal government walks away from a lot of those, they're still our rights and our programs. And I said earlier, we are who we are and we believe what we believe, and we're not going to lay down and change those things. We have some of the most brilliant, talented minds at this agency that are committed to the values we hold dear, and those are in those. And we will stay who we are.
Yeah, absolutely. And I commend you for sticking to your guns against the administration.
Right, Counselor?
Right, and the important thing too is that we are as fully compliant with all federal state law. That's the outcome, that what we do is supported by the law.
Certainly makes it easier.
I've got maybe one final comment on the community engagement part for the space activation. When I've been in some community engagement meetings before, there's a lot of people very concerned about seating and maybe.
Did you say seating?
Seating.
Okay.
Like benches.
Yeah,
picnic tables. I think just Chicago in general does not have nearly enough from an accessibility standpoint, but also like a destination standpoint. When this place opens up and there's space activated, am I going to walk through these 10 blocks in 15 minutes and then leave? Or am I going to hang out and form a community with the neighborhood? I
think our goal as we saw it as a vision, and the feedback we got is that we want both, right? People wanted a path they can meander through. You look at the design of the path, it weaves like this. It's not a straight path through because part of it was to control bike speed type stuff that we wanted to make sure that it wasn't, but it was because we saw it as a path through, but also a destination and things like that. The plan, I was trying to look to see, we have renderings in here, but I don't have any of the layouts, do include benches scattered throughout and seatings, just along the path itself. And separate from any activatable points like a dog park or a play area or anything like that, there are actually just places to walk and sit. In part because some of these blocks don't have big things like dog parks. Some of them are spaces that are meant to be able to be used for events and other things, but when they're not being used for those things, they are just part of a pleasant, very quiet path through, right? So, yeah. And then seating design is really a challenge. I think we have a really neat piece at Western on the Blue Line in our program. If you haven't had a chance to go see it, it's a dynamic piece. I don't remember the artist's name, but it is a terrazzo and stone concrete mix, multi-structure kind of piece in the plaza there that is meant to be an active sitting piece in the plaza. So that as you're sitting and waiting for the bus, or you're just sitting, there's a little cafe there that's very pleasant too. You can grab a bite, you can sit there, but it's a beautiful, beautiful piece. And it draws on ties to the Hispanic community and some of the architecture often seen in Mexico, and brings kind of that forward into this community. But it's very thoughtful about how the seating can be used and not abused in that sense. And that's a real challenge, I think, when we look at design features. It's about how we can make sure that they're meant for their intended purposes and users. And so we spend a lot of time about that. So thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you so much.
It's always good to see you guys.
Good to see you, and please give Leah my regards. Well, next on the agenda, since we swapped the working session with the chairman's report, I will go ahead and give a little bit of a report. First thing I wanted to share with you guys, myself and other leaders of transit advocacy groups signed off on a letter to Mayor Johnson and Chairman Barclay in regards to the CTA's new president, because we shared a common concern just about what that process is going to look like for the hiring of that individual. So I'm going to pass out the letter to you all so that you have it for your records. And if you all want to take a moment to review it, if you have any questions or thoughts that you care to share or additional concerns that perhaps weren't captured here, I'm happy to, open the floor for a discussion around that. But generally speaking, this letter was just brought up by Laura Softman, who is the chair of the ADA committee, or the advisory. So she and I had a conversation regarding that, and we were both very much concerned. So she drafted this letter, and we both kind of recruited other leaders to sign on to it, just because we want to make sure that the future of CTA, speaks to what we see as a bright future for transit in Chicago. And so take a moment to review, and then if you care to share any thoughts or additional comments, please feel free to do so.
I'd be happy to start.
Oh, okay, sure.
Yeah, no, I've read the letter, and I just want to thank you so much for signing on to it. The organizations that also signed are the exact people that I expected the Citizens Advisory Board to work with and champion in this room, right? I would love a transit expert to be our next CEO. And as long as a thorough search is done, I'm happy. I love everything in this letter. Thank you for signing it.
Sure. Thank you for your comment.
Yeah, as part of Communities Take Action, I had also approved, our group signing on to this, and this, I think, really captures everything. Last week, I did go to the CTA board special meeting and make a public comment about how they need to be like consulting the board and the search committee needs to be consulting with us. And so I hope that that was heard and will be taken seriously, and that we'll be hopefully having a discussion in this body about what is, what we want to see, and like, if there's potential finalists coming and that are named, like if there's a possibility for us to have a discussion about it in a meeting. Thank you for attending that meeting and providing a comment. I think that's exactly what is needed. And so your voice definitely, my hope is that it will continue to be amplified, through our collective concerns. Thank you for that. Any other thoughts or comments?
Are you aware of a response? See, it was sent on the 18th of April.
Yes, actually, Chairman Barclay is looking to schedule a meeting with myself and Laura. We have not set the date yet, but that will be in the coming days. So then if we do set a meeting, then we will, of course, Georgette will know. And if you, I don't know, want to share just for informational purposes via email what that day and time will be with the CAB, just so that they're aware. I don't know if that makes sense or not, but
It's a meeting just for the three of you, or
we're just
meeting with both advisory groups?
he's meeting with Laura and myself.
Okay.
Yeah.
You probably will want to report out.
Yeah, I can, at the next meeting, we'll make sure that we report back out on that, or, well, I'll touch base with you, Georgette, on the best way to kind of share that information out, because the other information is, kind of like thinking about as we come to the end of our term, our service term here as CAB board members. Now that's not a discussion point for today, because we, are going to lean on our council to support us with like what next steps look like. If, any of us would like to stay on the board, and if any of us are looking to leave at the end of the term or anything like that, like we need some guidance there, so that we know what our next meeting will look like. Saying that our term is June 30th. So we'll just kind of need some, some guidance on what next steps would be.
Sure.
Yeah. One other thing that I wanted to mention is that there is a young lady who did a really fantastic video. She did a presentation for school that has now become a really beautiful video where she talks about her concerns about CTA safety. Have you seen it?
I have not. I'm interested to hear about it.
But she's really, really delightful. She's a CPS student. And our hope is that we'll be able to meet her in the near future. I don't know, maybe we can discuss seeing if she can if school is still in session by the time we meet again, which I don't think it would be, but maybe we can try to schedule some time for her to come and speak with us, because having a youth voice in this space is really important. And so it would be fantastic to just have her share her thoughts with us and, just be in community with her and see how we can further connect with the youth, our youth riders. All that stuff. Yes, sir.
Say, I second that because I met with the young lady. And she had really pretty perspective on things, and I referred her to
Oh, wonderful. Thank you for that. Yes, Georgia sent her video to us, and to Robin and I, and we both like really think it's a great, it would generate really good conversation. And if there's an opportunity to engage with youth, perhaps this summer or some, depending on like how our term situation works out, that would be fantastic. So thank you for introducing her to us.
She, like many others, have personal experiences that are drawn to concerns that they may have for our transportation. So again, I think that she has a very good story to tell. Interesting insights.
We look forward to connecting with her.
Can you state your name for the court report?
Eddie Winters, General Manager, Security.
Is it possible for that presentation to be forwarded on to us so we can?
Yeah. If there aren't any other questions or comments about just those couple of things that I mentioned, we will await further instructions from our council on steps regarding our turn or extending our time on the board. And then, if there's anything else, then I guess we can close that part of the agenda out if there isn't.
Sure, just closing out the chairman's report.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was kind of like a report and a conversation, but
Will we be having a meeting in June?
that's what we need to determine because I don't think we set a meeting in June because it was bi-monthly, but our term ends June 30th. So that's something that we need to confirm. And we can, I am open to scheduling another date in June to close out and begin, it's the ending and beginning, however each individual decides to move forward. But depending, of course, on what council's advising would be on that.
I mean, we passed a motion for monthly meetings, so we should have one in June.
You did.
We did. Thank you. We did. So did we schedule it?
It has not been scheduled.
It's not been scheduled. So then that's the next step is that we'll need to schedule that meeting. So then we can send a poll around and get those dates. And then we'll determine whether or not, what that meeting will consist of. We'll develop that agenda, so. Okay. I think I kind of spilled over into new business when I kind of talked about the items that I just went over. But is there any other new business?
There is no other new business.
Okay, fantastic.
Can I just ask a question, I guess, to the board? When was our last report to the board of directors?
Last time I gave a report was in March.
Okay. Yeah, what did y'all cover and how did you think it went?
Now you got me digging in my memory base. No, but from what I remember, the report was well received. I think that was the first meeting or a report where the interim president was there. And so that was our opportunity to share with her what the CAB has been up to, kind of what we are hoping for the future. Is more of a, sharing some of our thoughts that we've kind of built together in terms of what the future of CAB looks like. We have the transcript, so we can go back through that. I'm so sorry that I can't remember the details, but I do remember that she was very receptive. The board was very receptive. And they feel like there was another key thing that I want to make sure I share with you, but I am struggling to remember exactly what it was because there was some other positive sentiment that came out of that discussion, and I am struggling to remember what that was. So I'll make sure to follow up, but overall, it was she and the board were very, they're always, really happy to hear from us.
So the YouTube and the transcript and the minutes are all on the CTA website from all the meetings?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't remember there being a report in March. I thought our last report might have been February or even January.
I think it was in March.
I'm looking at the meeting now to try to find you.
But
Oh,
yeah, beyond that point, I remember just from our last meeting, like we all kind of unanimously agreed that the data from the chatbot was really good. The chatbot works. And like we all agreed that smoking is a big issue and that we need to bring that up with the board. So I'm wondering, have we done that yet? And if not, when do we plan to?
we did talk, it was in February. We did talk about, I know, I did bring up safety and smoking. Did I bring, I think I did.
February was before the meeting we discussed it,
Mhm.
right?
Okay. I would have to just review that. I'm sorry. But that doesn't mean that we can't, make sure that we put more emphasis on it on the next report. Smoking is definitely something that consistently comes up in conversations. And just the safety concerns. And that's why I brought up the young lady that, has a youth perspective on that as well. And we had talked about, youth ridership on the CTA and kind of like this, youth not being present as much as they should or could be. And that impacting the perception of safety because youth aren't present. And so this young lady, I think her thoughts around that, like would have a great impact on just future conversations around that too.
Just to note, I have been on CTA trains where the conductor has stopped the train and announced that smoking is not allowed when there is smoking occurring in some of the cars.
Like stopped it at the station and has that been effective? Like do people?
I have
Oh.
I'm on one train out of thousands.
I've not been on a train where the conductor stopped it. I have heard conductor get on the speaker and say, reemphasize smoking on the train is not allowed. Yeah, I don't know. I do also hear a lot of people talking about how the K-9 people, the unarmed security folks are just on their phones or, yeah, exactly. So it's just, what is the most effective strategy to help get societal norms back in place? So,
Thank you.
yes, no problem. We'll make sure to re-emphasize that in the next report.
Hey,
Oh, yeah.
okay, real quick, last CAB meeting, we listened to about the pilot program that had cameras installed on certain buses, I think 3 buses, to issue tickets for those delivery trucks or residential cars parking in bus lanes. And it seemed like with the CAB, we were all kind of in agreement that it should be a revenue sharing between the city and the CTA. Since I haven't had a board, an update to the board yet, the governing board, can we make sure to include that mention as well?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm curious to know how that's going. So, yeah, would it be possible, maybe not to have a full out presentation, because that was a lengthier presentation, but maybe just the report out or like even if we can just get it via email, just like kind of where those numbers are for that.
Talk to that team and if we might, Madam Chairperson, we can have a motion to permit Danielle Stanley to participate in the meeting remotely. A work commitment that she has that it's caused her not to be here physically.
Absolutely. Yes, I motion.
You.
Oh, okay.
Anyone but, anyone
allowing me
other
to
than,
participate.
no, you can't move for yourself. Anyone other than the chair.
Okay.
I'll second.
It's been moved by Scott Vanderwill that Danielle Stanley be permitted to participate in the meeting remotely due to a work commitment, which causes her to not be here physically. And the motion has been seconded by Peter Henderson. We'll take a roll call vote. Scott Vanderwill,
Yay.
Caroline Pavlovic. Yes. Ryan McCray,
Yes.
Chairperson Raby. Yes. Vice Chairperson Johnson,
Yes.
Peter Henderson,
Yes.
and Sonia Del Rio.
Yes. We are having quite a.
Danielle Stanley, you are permitted to be in the meeting.
Thank you for allowing me to participate, y'all.
I do hope that her prior statements are.
Retroactive.
Okay.
I want to touch on what Danielle said as well, because I did look over that report and I saw we gave money away for an AI contract. And then we're giving money away again because all of that revenue that's coming, that's using our Novas and New Flyers are just going to Department of Finance. Nowhere in that report says we're getting money back from that. So I do want to commend her for saying that, because I looked at it, which doesn't make any sense to me. How we're just throwing money away and we're not, not getting anything back as a revenue, because they're using our buses to write tickets and it's only going to finance. That has nothing to do with the authority. So I just caution them to be smart about their decisions and choices that they make when making contracts.
That's fair. I also want to jump on that part about the AI part, reemphasize my comment last time was about just the concern around using AI or like facial recognition and things. I know that this is more specific around like cars and
Track.
license plates or whatever they're using to track that information, but it's just also something to note that for future use, like I hope that, CTA or any entity that we partner with will be mindful about the use of AI technology in that way. Any other thoughts? Okay, can I get a motion to adjourn? A motion to adjourn.
Second.
It's been moved by Sonia Del Rio, seconded by Peter Henderson, that the CAB meeting for May 16th be adjourned. We'll take a roll call vote. Scott Vanderwill.
Yes.
Caroline Pavlovic.
Yes.
Ryan McCray.
Yes.
Tanya Raby.
Yes.
Rob Johnson.
Yes.
Peter Henderson.
Yes.
Sonia Del Rio.
Yes.
Danielle Stanley.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you, everyone.
Great.
Thank you.